Wait, so you were selling, you were moving large amounts of blow to the Pacific Stock Exchange in San Fran, and one of the guys who was buying a lot from you invited you to come to the Democratic National Convention as a VIP guest.
Yeah, as a friend.
That's what. Okay, and that makes sense. You hear
everybody was doing coke. Everybody was doing coke back then. Everyone back then. Yeah. This is again before crack. I ended up having a couple of contracts.
Oh, darn, right at the good part.
I think the FBI cut it off. I think they've been, we got enough.
That was actually perfect.
We got enough evidence.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Right. And now he's never going to remember where he was in the story either.
We have playback.
Are you texting him?
Yeah.
Either that or someone heard the location and found him. Everyone's putting topics together. Like, what do you want to talk about with Blake today? This and that. We have some like the election, different topics that we want to get just your opinion on. But then everyone was sending me like all these Netflix shows and Amazon shows and movies. And like, oh, ask him about this. Ask him about pop culture. I'm like, yeah, I understand, man. The only show I've ever heard the guy talk about in the last year is like with 90 Day Fiancé. Is that what it's called? I'm like, the guy watches 90 Day Fiancé. He's like, Drew, did you see this episode? I'm like, you kidding me?
I watch it. You have good
hilarious.
taste in shows,
So
Blake. It's
funny,
so addicting.
Yes. What is the deal with that?
Hilarious.
Drew needs to get with it.
You still watching that?
You know what it is? Yeah, it's a constant cluster. You know, that it's just constant. I mean, it's just one disaster after another, and and of course, they got the thing playing in real time. But one person is totally disadvantaged, and that's a foreigner. And that's trying to get to America, and it's just like blatant that they want to get to the United States, almost like 9 out of 10, times. And they're just the dynamics of just the whole thing, man, love and relationships and the cultural differences and, the fact, that old factor. And it's pretty bizarre, man.
So that's why he watches it. Why do you guys watch 90 Day Fiancé?
I mean, same reason. It's just a catastrophe, and you think to yourself, this is never going to work out, right? Like, this is just never going to work out. How are these two people even trying right now? And it's just, you have to watch it. It really is amazing. And also, the saying is so true that love is blind, because, for us outsiders looking in, it's so obvious, like, you guys, this is not going to work. But in the moment, they're like, let's get back together. No, we're fighting now. Now we're back together.
But it's not real, all right? It's all scripted.
No, it's real. It's totally real.
They have Instagram accounts.
Here's the other thing, too, is like, you come over here and you don't see foreign women trying to hook up with Filipino guys, right? You see that, you see Westerners going around the world where they're poorer countries, where there's chicks. But in Cuba, you see foreign women, and in Jamaica, you see foreign women going, hardcore for the guys, right? Foreign, Western women going hardcore in Jamaica and Cuba. But, the thing, and when you see that, and you see that here in this case, there's a couple that are going for African guys.
It would have been like a funny game show question if Blake was on it, if someone said, pick his favorite TV show, either The Sopranos or 90 Day Fiancé. How many fucking people do you think would have picked 90 Day Fiancé? Guys been...
I like Sopranos, even though so much, a lot of that was bullshit, I see, funny thing is, I see Michael going hardcore. Frenzy's going hardcore.
He's killing
on
it. He's
YouTube.
Everywhere.
Yeah, I see him going hardcore, and then he's doing like a movie critique of movie and Sopranos and stuff. He's always spot on, man. I mean, I'll like that guy to the day I die. I mean, but we haven't. I actually should try and reach out to him. I haven't, but I mean, there's no reason, because I have no plans to come back there and hang out. So
say hello to an old friend.
Yeah. But he's he's working it. He's definitely working it. And that guy is. I tell people that know about me. I'm like, I've known that guy since he was in his 20s, or maybe early 30s, and we connected a few times after we were incarcerated in the 80s, and that guy. He's a good guy. He's a decent guy, and he definitely. Of course, I say all the time, people like to put yeast in their stories. It's like when you do a resume, everybody tries to to up their Word or their Excel or whatever, PowerPoint skills, or
Yep.
everybody tries to make their resumes look a little bit better. And
Yep.
and it's funny when I see him talk about, how he did. He did really well, but it's kind of funny when he talks about that. He throws a little bit of yeast into who and what he was. But he was a legit guy, and he was a really serious earner. But he was always a gentleman. He was always a really good.
But
dude,
everybody lies on their resumes. I remember when we interviewed Dana, her resume, she put, likes working with people.
People,
we figured
not
that everybody, fudges just a little. It's expected.
Yeah. So,
hey, you mentioned Ariel, man. That's a beautiful story. Are you comfortable talking about your daughter and what just happened in her life?
Well, started a law firm with a friend of mine, my best friend at the time, which I miss him. But at any rate, long story short is that when my daughter graduated undergraduate at UConn, she came back to California, and I asked her, do you want to work in my law firm in San Diego? And she came to work in the firm, and she was really good. And she worked there for like a year. And in the law firm, everybody's like an executive. You don't have low-level employees. And so I had, and since I'm not a lawyer, I had my perceptions of the people that were there, and then she would develop and share hers with me. And it was really kind of insightful of how she gauged people's characters, and I thought that was.
And really, I don't want to interrupt. I want to go with the story with you. Is that she's always been, or in her adult life, she's been aware of your background. She knew the world you lived in. She knew you'd been in prison.
I'll tell you, I'm getting to that story. It's pretty emotional for me. So she decides to go back to law school after this year period in San Diego, working in the law firm. She's just a receptionist, and she's doing some, some filings and some work, some light research. So she applies to all these universities. She gets accepted to Chicago U, which is number 4 of I think there's 200 law schools in the United States. It's number 4, Chicago Law, University of Chicago. Very, really hard to get into. And she got accepted, but she sent me her, what do you call it when you apply? You have to do like a personal letter.
Like an essay in her application.
Yeah. She sent me a personal essay, and we had never talked about it, but I read it, and I can watch a movie and have a little bit of a tear jerk, but I don't, pain or whatever. It's I'm not a tear jerker. But I read this and man, I was just so proud. I remember feeling these tears come down my eyes in the letter, and I got it. I'll send it to you.
You've shared it with me, but tell us the part about that got you emotional.
Well, she talks about why she wants to get into law. She goes, when I was younger, like all kids, I mean, if they have a good relationship with their fathers, they look up to their fathers. So she mentions when I was 13 years old, my father sat me down and told me everything about his past. And she says, suddenly my perception and view of him was shattered, and I was wrecked in so many words. That's what she said. But then it goes on to say that over the next year or two, or however many years, she regained an appreciation and respect and this, that, and the other, and that I was a really good father. And for whatever way she came to a conclusion that I was obviously a decent person, and that I ended up being quite successful legitimately, besides illegitimately. So she grew up in that company, and so she ended up thinking that people that with my kind of background should have second chances. And she became proud of me, and when she started looking back, at first she was devastated, then she became proud, and then she decided after she graduated she wanted to go into law and do impact litigation. Impact litigation, and the average starting salary is $139,000 a year for their graduates. But she says, you know what, I'm going to take a half of that or less, and I want to be a public defender. And I want to represent criminals that need to be represented. So that's what she did, and that's where she's at. She's at the law firm now. And she just graduated, and she just passed the bar first test. She was a little worried about passing it, and she passed it first shot.
I remember,
that's a big achievement.
Yeah,
Congrats.
I remember when you were telling me the steps along the way, and that when she first wrote the essay to get into law school and referenced your background and the things that, you know, and you just wrote full circle, huh? Life goes full circle. And that was what you wrote. And I knew that was a really impactful thing for you.
I didn't know that. When I read it, I was like kind of like thrown off balance and off guard. I had no idea that she went through that experience until I read her essay. I say to people all the time that know my past, I talk about it. It's like, I think it's almost the exact same thing as people that go to war and that hit, you know, that are in the battlefield. You know, there's rules of engagement. There's a politician that I know now that put these two words together. I never heard him before, and I'm like, man, that is great. That is a great description. He calls it a gentlemanly combatant. I never heard those two words put together, and I'm like, wow, that's a really good description of where, you know, I think that it's appropriate to go to war, you know, and you know, it's.
You said that it was like it was an army. It's like one army versus the other army, and you said, generally speaking, you know, people know what they're signing up for. If you're in that world, it's not like the milkman or the, you know, and that I remember that perspective that, you know, that you saw it as a completely different thing. I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just saying I remember that very vividly from all those years ago.
You know, your brothers in arms, your brothers at war. You have the same agenda, and of course, there's treachery like a motherfucker in that life, which is the reason why it's a dead end. It's not a long-term game plan, you know. That's a hard life, man. It really is. But it's you know, it comes with its benefits, you know. It's, you know, it's a double-edged sword, you know. You burn like a comet, but you burn quick, but you burn hot, you know.
What's an example of a benefit? Asking for a friend.
Say again?
What's an example of the benefits that come with it? I'm just curious.
Like Dana was saying, like, what would be like the cool part about being your buddy back then?
When you're in that life, you look at the world and the people in it in three separate categories. There's your family. There's your crew or your people, whether they're above you or below you, that are in that life are tighter than your family. And then there's the rest of the world. And when you're in that life, you look at the rest of the world as being a mark. Basically, that's how you look at it. I mean, like the government going and trying to tax everybody. They look at, if you buy, I say to people all the time, I was like, you think that you own your home in the U.S., don't pay your property taxes and see who owns your home in a few years. You don't own anything in the United States. They're going to tax you. So that's the way they look at it too. You know, we're going to tax everybody that is not part of those first two groups. So some people come and you're taking a look at them, and you're always gauging them in that life is like, is this person a friend or is this person a mark? Now, they may think that you're their friend, but you don't look at them. It's not reciprocated. So, and depending on their stature, you end up having to sit down with them. It's like, how can I use this person? You know, and not in a predatory way, but definitely in an exploitive way. And sometimes you're looking at somebody's like, you know, you'll say to somebody else, I knew a guy in La Jolla who had a Budweiser distributorship. And I remember he paid like $15 million for that. And that was, what year? That was like 1989, 1990, somewhere around that time. He's passed away and wanted to be a friend of ours, but was a straight up square. And, you know, would have me and my guys.
Square means honest, right? Square means that he doesn't break the law.
Straight. Made all his money straight, lived his whole life straight.
Okay.
And I remember one time we're visiting him, and he liked to have guys like us around. He like, you know, a lot of squares are like that. They want to feel like they have their own personal, you know, army, or they have that kind of vicarious connection and power. And you'll see that in all these shows, you know, these movies and stuff when they portray that in Hollywood, because the guys that are advising them all lived in this life too. So anyways, this guy comes down there, and I remember sitting with him after a few months and saying, listen, Jimmy, that was his first name. I said, Jimmy, listen, you have all this. I said, you're sitting at the table. You like to have my guys. I ever tell you this story, Drew?
I'm not sure.
I said, you know, he would come up to Beverly Hills. I said, you like to have all my guys and have this big show of everybody at a table at Morton's or Spog or something like that. But, you know, all these gangsters sitting at the table with him and his girlfriend, his pretty girlfriend. He was older than me. And I said, you know, my guys would rather be sitting outside watching the car. You know, they'd rather have them cash instead of you buying them this meal. I said, you're sitting at the table every day having a big fat steak. You got to cut a little of the fat off for my guys. I says, can you put them in your distribution? So I got them all no paid jobs in that Budweiser distributorship, because he understood that, you know, you could show us off, but you know, I'm not going to talk about what he asked us, but you know, you get in bed with guys like that and they're going to say, listen, you know, you want to show us off, you want to act this way, you have to pay, you know, and it wasn't done in like, you know, or else. Yeah. It wasn't that kind of a conversation because we were friendly, but that's how we're looking at it. He's not one of us at the end of the day, but you know, I wasn't honest with him, like really how we look at him. But that's how that life is, you know? We're
not all sitting down having steak dinner with you because we enjoy your company. We'll let you feel that way, but there's a cost to it.
We do enjoy his company, but he's not one of us. You understand? And we know who and what he is. We know what his net worth is. We know where his house is. We know, you know, Budweiser distributorships are worth probably $100 million now. Back then, they were $15 million.
So when you say that when you say, Blake, that you got your guys some no-pay jobs with him, and I'm familiar with this from some of the TV shows.
More than one company, by the way, same guys. So,
but describe the no-paid job, and my concern is once you do that, Dana's going to want to like have a no-pay job at launch, and I'm going to have that discussion.
It's no show. It's pay, but no show.
Right.
It's a no.
So you basically got them full-time jobs. So your buddy ends up hiring your friends, your crew, and they're getting paid, they're on the payroll, but they don't got to show up and do anything. It's a no pay.
Is Drew a square?
Everybody's a square unless their livelihood is from criminal activities. My kids are squares, everybody's a square unless their livelihood is from criminal. And that is because when you live that life, you have to look over both shoulders, one for law enforcement and the next guy that is in the same industry as you trying to knock you down. It's another world, you know, that life is another world. You have to be on your toes all the time, and you have to be putting your brain in a different mode than a square brain, right?
We want to talk about politics and get your opinion on it, because you're living overseas. You're always one of the most intelligent people, period, for any topic or conversation. I always loved our conversations about whatever's happening in the world. Have you been following the U.S. elections with Trump and Biden, watching any of it, reading it? What do you think about those cats?
Well, thank you for the compliment. Unfortunately, I don't have the same view of myself as you do, but that's cool. You know, sounds good. What do I think? Well, what I know is that everybody in New York nobody in New York has ever respected that guy.
Which guy?
And they all. Donald Trump, man.
Okay.
He's the biggest joke since the 80s. Everybody in New York hates that guy. They all know his true colors. He's a buffoon.
Well, what about the other guy? You got Biden. So if you were here in the U.S., I mean, I don't even think...
There's no comparison between Biden and Trump. I mean, it's horrible. Of course, listen, if I was super wealthy and I didn't believe in Roe versus Wade, and I didn't want... or I was in the medical field or medical insurance field, I would love Trump, you know? That's the bottom line. And, you know, my daughter and I talked about this, and she says that it's astounding how these super PACs, these super wealthy, and the Republican Party play all these, and I mean, I don't mean to be offensive, but uneducated white voters, how they play them right into their hands when they're constantly voting against their best interests. That's the bottom line. So what is Fox News? I mean, I don't care if anybody hates me saying this. I mean, it is what it is, man.
How long have you been living out of the United States?
Well, I wanted to leave here the minute I got out of prison in 1996. When I got out, I was brutalized by the parole system. It's hard, that whole parole system. I mean, of course, I tried to manipulate as much as I could at the time, but it's hard. And, you know, the whole thing is like I just says, I mean, see how free you are in that country when you own your home and don't pay your property taxes if you can. Mm-hmm. Pay 2% of its value. See how free you are. How if you think you own your home, you don't. You won't very soon. So it's not a free country.
Yeah. Especially
for people like me, you know. So
it's a very divided country here right now.
Exactly. I mean, that's such a macro, huge question. I mean, I can tell you that I've always been interested in politics for personal reasons. I mean, and financial. I don't know if I touched on it before, but Pacific Stock Exchange, I think I mentioned this back then when I was smuggling cocaine. Pacific Stock Exchange is the options trading exchange, and it's based in San Francisco. And I was supplying that whole floor back then. This was before crack cocaine, right? And so I was moving a lot, and there was somebody that owned one of the brokerages that was a big client. And he invited me. Before crack cocaine came out, then it became kind of like look down your nose at it, because before that, you know, nobody was doing coke because the high is so short period of time and it was so costly. So that everybody that was doing it were like, you know, judges, attorneys, and medical people. You know, I remember reading an article in TV Guide that they were talking about, you know, this drug that's non-addictive that is the toast of Hollywood, you know?
Yeah.
You know,
around you used to see like at Studio 54, like the celebrities.
Oh yeah,
athletes,
especially
they'd wear the necklaces, but the necklace would be a little spoon on the end, and you just wear your necklace openly, and it was a little Coke spoon, and you just, you know, I mean, not that I was there, but
it didn't feel addictive until Richard Pryor, you know, opened up everybody's eyes with freebase, which is basically crack.
Yeah, but lit himself on fire. I mean,
he was using acetone or ether instead of water and baking soda, which they started doing later on. But he blew himself up, and that's highly addictive, and that's when that whole thing. And then they started breaking down. You can buy $5 worth. It turned into an epidemic. But at that time, it was a rich person's drug. It was a complete party drug, and that was the '80s, and that was. You know, that was before HIV. You know, the world was different.
What do you guys want to ask Blake?
I want to know if he saw what the CNN analyst has done.
Yeah.
Did you see that story on the news? The CNN head legal guy, Toobin, was in the news yesterday.
I saw that. I watched the news. I'm like I follow the news religiously.
Well, yeah, this guy's the legal analyst for CNN. He's a big writer for the New Yorker. He's a professional, and
they talk about. But what exactly happened? Did he jack off or something? I mean, what did he do? They don't. They say about what happened, but they don't say exactly what was seen.
I don't think they know yet. It's being investigated, and it's unclear. Or I'm sure it exists.
Busted a nut on his Zoom or something.
I thought he was just exposed.
Well, they know that he was exposed, and then he said something like, "I thought the thing was on mute." So then you're like, "Well,
I thought they couldn't hear me."
And they thought they couldn't hear me. So I don't know.
Somebody thought was going on.
I'll tell you a funny story. There was a club. This place was called Hellfire. It was in Chelsea, Lower West Side of Manhattan, and it was in the meatpacking district. And you would go down, and it was like $30 cover charge. This is like in freaking 1982.
It's a lot of cover. That's a big cover charge back in the early.
You know, and I was asked, how come the cover charges never went up 20 years later? It's still $30. I didn't understand that with these clubs. So you go down there, and it's subterranean, and it's all black, and it's like these underground, not tunnels, but cavernous rooms that you go from one to another. And they have a bar in one of them, and I don't know if you guys ever heard of this. Like, there's some. I never went to Paddles. That was another famous. There were these underground, I want to say sexual theme clubs back then. And again, this is prior to HIV, and they were super packed, and they were kind of like an after hours place. So there's one guy there's one guy that rings in my head. So this place was crazy. You go to different rooms and they had different things like
dungeons
metal
and shit. Yeah.
Yeah, metal that you could, tie somebody up. They had like a glory hole where you could put your in, somebody would suck it on the other side. You'd be at the bar and all of a sudden a guy and a couple and somebody would come up to him and they says, yeah, you could suck my girlfriend's toes. You go to the unisex toilet and there'd be like a bathtub toilet and somebody be peed on all night. And everybody is volunteers. There's no paid performance. All these Wall Street people, I mean, everybody, all these celebrities would come in there and it was some place that was just insane. But I'll never forget this one guy walks in and he's wearing this impeccably tailored three-piece suit, white hair. He looks 70 years old, super rigid, the way he would walk. And I see him going, he looked a little out of place because he's a little, maybe there's quite a bit of 50-year-olds, but not like 75-year-olds in there. But he just looked like super wealthy, super like unbelievable, like gentlemanly. And there's so many people there. I turn around, I see him like 10 minutes later, and somebody obviously took his clothes. He's wearing, I don't know if you guys remember, in the 80s, these what do you call it? Agura sweaters were really popular, where they're this really soft fur sweater girls still wear that? Those really like soft cashmere? Furry sweaters?
Oh, I don't know.
Agura. Yeah, like cashmere, but they're like, it's like a really, really soft sweater material, and I believe it was like a real fur, or like a sheep, like some type of a sheep. It wasn't a skin, it was a fur. Anyways, they were expensive. And this long white sweater, and underneath he had one of those fake, boobs, right? And then his whole suit was gone, and he was wearing lady stockings, the ones where they're crotchless, and his junk was hanging out. And he was still walking around the exact same way that he was when he walked in, wearing this suit. And it kind of blew me away. And I used to see all these people like, how could they have these, like you have a perspective of them. And this guy, I got it in 2 seconds. I'll never forget that guy. And not just him, but he was the most extreme. You have a perspective of them in 1 minute, and then another when they're totally different people. And that always kind of like got me kind of screwy. And so when you talked to me about this guy Jeffrey Toobin, that's it flashed back to that old guy. Man.
I don't know if you remember
Hellfire.
This. On a somewhat related.
That are from New York remember that club. You could probably Google it. Go ahead.
You and I like, again, probably whatever it was, 15, 20 years ago, something, we were working together, and we did that deal for the cameras, all the digital cameras that we bought together and did a business on. I think there were cell phones at the time, I'm not sure, but yet if they did, they could take a photo, they couldn't do video and all that stuff. And someone I knew, was bringing in cameras from China at the time, these little handheld video cameras, and this one was like 5 megapixels, and nothing else had been doing that before. And it had this feature on it, which cameras didn't have then, had a little mini teeny tripod where you can put it up and film yourself. And again, this is a long time ago, so we're thinking, so the next day, we decide that there at the LA Convention Center was the gay, lesbian, erotic convention, and it was like some pretty hardcore stuff. And you're like, I bet you could move those there because they got the tripod, whatever. And you're like, so take them all up and go there. And I'm like, I'm not going alone. And he goes, take Bo. Do you remember Bo, obviously?
Of course. I still keep in touch with Bo.
Right. So Bo worked for Blake, and worked in the company, again, not at like selling cameras at the erotica conventions, but had a real job otherwise outside of that. The other thing is Bo was about yay big and sweetest little dude in the world, and was like hardcore on everything. So Blake calls him and he goes, hey, Bo, this weekend you're going to go with Drew and sell some cameras at this event, everything. I'm like, okay. So we're getting there and we're driving there, and as we start walking to the thing, and he's like, and what type of event is this? And I look at Bo and I'm like, Blake didn't tell you? And all of a sudden, like as we walk into the LA, I kid you not, there's 2 entrances. One is welcome to the gay erotica convention, and on the other side, I kid you not, was the Boy Scouts of convention local chapter. And they're diverging in itself. So you would walk into our building event, and it was hardcore, man. And again, I'm not judging, but it's stuff that you'd never been exposed to. The first thing you see when you walk in, like most people were walking through the door, and literally just stripping completely naked and walking around this conference hall. So we had a booth. We'd rented a booth, and we had our cameras set up, and literally, like, we were next to the dungeons, and then on one side was the dungeons, and on the other side was allegedly a group of, and it was a video series, I guess, that did very well. There was no Netflix back then and no DVDs or VHS, but it was a group of boys, college boys, who marketed themselves as absolutely straight college boys who love girls but have gay sex on video because that's something that people, and this is in the LA. So we were like selling out of cameras left and right. Now the issue, we sold them all out. The issue with Bo is that because of his height, his eye level was not comfortable for him. and I just remember like, and he's like, did Blake know about this?
Probably looks fondly on that day. Probably.
Yeah, you got to ask. He'll remember that entirely. He's
Oh my gosh.
you know, it was. I just remember that literally. Like, well, I would be like explaining the features, and you'd have, I mean, these were great people just going through the topic, asking questions, and Bo was our demo guy. He knew the camera. He was really good at electronics. The guy's asking a question, but that's a good question. I'm like, Bo, hey, Bo, and I'd look down, and Bo'd be like this, like, huh?
Yeah, man, there's no limit to people's fetishes. I mean, and now you know, I think it's all for the world to see or know about just by Googling anything. I mean, it's bizarre. People have bizarre, you know, tastes. I mean, I'm pretty traditional, so.
All right, brother.
Yeah,
we're gonna let you go. We'll talk soon.
to you
Love
guys.
you.
Enjoy your
Be good.
day.
See,
Bye.
Bye.
okay, see ya.
Bye.
Bye.